Hola, buenas noches. Hello, good evening. Happy Pride Month in San Diego. My name is Fernando Lopez. I am the Executive Director of San Diego Pride. I use they, them, their pronouns. And it is my pleasure to be with you today for what is our Spirit of Stonewall series. So usually every year we have our Spirit of Stonewall rally. And at that rally, we honor the origins of our movement. We celebrate the heroes in our community that are doing the pioneering work to push our movement forward. And we talk about the work that still needs to be done so that way we continue our pursuit of justice with joy. So this year we're doing things a little different. We're still having our Spirit of Stonewall rally next Friday, although it will be virtual and streaming to your homes just like tonight's event. But we've added in these new segments that we're calling the Spirit of Stonewall series, where we're taking a little more intentional time to get to know each of our awardees a little better. So while their bios and their photos are usually on our website and in local papers, which they still will be, we're taking a little extra time to have some conversations with them so you can get to know them a little better and the work that they're doing in our community. Tonight's guest is our highest award at San Diego Pride, which is the Champion of Pride Award, which is given to someone who does some incredible pioneering work over a series of years. And this person is truly at the tip of the spear of our movement. And it's an honor to know that Bixby Marino-Kibbee is our Champion of Pride this year. It's been a pleasure to know them and work with them over the years. Bix is a queer, non-binary trans person, a licensed clinical social worker, and program director for the new Center for Gender Affirming Care at Rady's Children's Hospital. They've worked in mental health care for over 15 years, and since moving to San Diego in 2011, their work has focused on bringing community-based wraparound care to marginalized and at-risk youth. As the Director of Behavioral Health at the San Diego LGBT Community Center from 2015 to 2019, Bix led a team of clinicians providing outpatient therapy to LGBTQ plus people and those impacted by HIV and AIDS. And they made groundbreaking efforts to address the needs of trans and non-binary folks, youth and adults by increasing access to gender-affirming mental health care services and helping to navigate the challenging healthcare system. Personally, I also can say that when I was sexually assaulted 7 years ago, we came together as a community and Pride and San Diego Pride and the LGBT Community Center to start the LGBTQ Survivors Task Force. And without Bix, I know that we wouldn't have been as successful as a coalition as we have become. And they also helped to start the Me Too LGBTQ Conference, which is a first of its kind conference that centers on LGBTQ care culturally competent survivor care for LGBTQ folks who are survivors. In 2019, Bix joined Rady Children's Hospital as the first program director for the Center for Gender Affirming Care. So please welcome to our virtual stage, Bix Marino-Kibbee.
Thanks, Fern. Such an honor to be here talking with you today, and really appreciate the recognition.
Well, I can think of no one better this year to honor, and it's just incredible to have watched you, seen you grow and serve our community over the years in such incredible ways. And so just thank you for the incredible work that you are doing for our community and for joining us today.
Of course, yeah.
So we're going to go through a series of questions, and at the end, if we have some time, we'll take some questions from the audience. So we'll go ahead and get started. So again, thank you so much for everything that you've done and everything that you do. You really have been a trailblazer in healthcare for our community, for survivor rights and survivor care for the LGBT community, and of course, obviously for trans and non-binary young people, which is so important. So just, can you tell us, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really exciting to be not only at the center, to be in a space that's really, so affirming of trans and non-binary and queer people. I think it's the first workplace I was ever in where I felt like I could really integrate all parts of myself. And then being at Rady has been just an amazing opportunity to kind of be on the forefront of healthcare and to feel like I have, the ability to shape kind of what I would want healthcare to look like, for myself if I were a young trans or non-binary person trying to access things now.
Yeah, it's just so amazing to know that that is something that exists now. It's incredible. And I'm just so glad to know that you're at the helm of that. It gives me great comfort.
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice. I think often we think about, trans people are either trans or they're providers, and it's nice to be able to kind of integrate the two and to help people understand that, people who are a part of the community are also serving the community, and we don't have this kind of us-them dynamic anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk more about that, because we talk a lot about that here at Pride, and obviously at the center, I know that was a conversation that happens there, and now you're having that at Rady's, and the ability to actually enter a workplace and be your whole self unapologetically, and to not have to explain, at least in the day-to-day, the employees and that, you're sort of around, you still end up having to explain yourself, I feel like, to folks on the outside. But for this in particular, like working in a supportive environment where you can bring your whole self, can you speak to that a little more? Because I think not everybody gets to have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think I experienced that for the first time working at the LGBT Center in San Diego, where I, for the first time had colleagues who were trans and colleagues who were non-binary and queer, and knowing that kind of on a day-to-day basis, I could really kind of connect with other people who shared a similar life experience, and that wasn't a part of my identity that I had to leave at home or separate from the work that I do. And at Rady, it's a little bit of a different dynamic because, part of my job is to provide education around the hospital and to help healthcare providers understand what it's like to be a trans person in a healthcare setting. And so I'm using parts of myself in a different way now, but I'm so lucky to have kind of this supportive cocoon of other kind of queer colleagues at Rady that's really kind of provided that support that's needed anytime you're using all those parts of yourself to do work.
That's so important. And, I think we talk a lot about the emotional labor that it takes for someone who is from a marginalized community to do that work, right? You're really you're bringing yourself to work and explaining yourself at work. And so it's just great to hear that you're in such a supportive environment, because that work to support our kids is just so vital. Thank you for doing that emotional labor.
Of course.
So what is gender affirming healthcare, and how does it address the needs of our trans and non-binary community?
Yeah, so I think of gender affirming healthcare in a similar way, that I think about trauma-informed care. It's an additional lens through which we're understanding people. And I think so often, and historically, of course, trans and non-binary folks have, I think, really been pathologized by medical communities. And so it's really understanding the whole person and understanding the ways that that gender kind of impacts our experience in the world. And then I think gender affirming care in terms of what we provide at Rady is about trying to create a safe medical home for young people to be able to come and get all aspects of their care addressed. So of course, hormones and puberty blockers and, connection to gender affirming surgery are all things that are important for some and many trans people. But that's not the only part of our medical care that we care about. Trans people break their arms, we get into car accidents, we get cancer, and we need to know that we can go to a health system and receive care for any part of ourselves, and have that be provided in a space that feels respectful, that feels safe. And I think that also understands the way that gender dysphoria impacts how people's feelings of safety or lack of safety in a healthcare setting. So I think our whole approach has been to understand, what do people need in order to feel heard, to feel like their care is competent, and to feel like it's really individualized to their own needs.
Yeah, and that goes right back to even, bringing your whole self, right? You're talking about bringing your whole self and feeling free to be your whole self at work. And now we're asking young people who are learning the world, who are trying to understand themselves in the world, and saying that you can be safe and bring your whole self without fear into a healthcare setting, right? Which can be so traumatizing.
Yeah, I think one of my goals personally is that I want to see this young generation of queer and trans and non-binary people feeling comfortable doing preventative healthcare. I know I grew up not necessarily feeling comfortable accessing healthcare, and that certainly impacts how you manage your healthcare needs as an adult. And so I think we're really trying to set the tone that young people can have a positive experience, they can feel heard, that they'll grow up to be adults who take care of all of the parts of their body, whether those parts of their body feel, distressing to them or not.
Mm-hmm. And I love that this is obviously for gender affirming care. And I think that we know, right, that LGBTQ folks as a whole don't feel comfortable entering into healthcare environments. And that's true of a lot of marginalized communities. And so I'm really hopeful that, again, like here you are again at the leading edge of this work where you are helping our trans community, and that work can really help to inform a more inclusive overall healthcare experience for a lot of our marginalized community and youth. And it's great to see that Rady's taking that lens.
Absolutely. So, we actually just, as part of our expansion of our clinic, added a brand new division of adolescent medicine and young adult healthcare. It's the first time in Rady, and it's really not a specialty that's seen a whole lot in San Diego. And a big part of that program has been making sure that we have diverse representation among the healthcare providers, so that when you come in to access your care, you see yourself reflected. If I never see another trans provider, that doesn't help me feel very secure and safe. We want to make sure that that all of our the patients that may want to come to our care, whether whether there are socioeconomic differences or racial diversity, or we see a lot of kids who are in systems of care. We want everyone to be able to come and feel represented and feel like their whole person is understood.
And that's so important. And I wanted to go back to a piece of that is the trauma-informed care, because you said it, and not necessarily everyone who's watching might fully understand what trauma-informed care is. And we talk about trauma-informed education, trauma-informed organizing. And so what is trauma-informed care for everyone?
Yeah, I think trauma-informed care is about understanding the ways in which experiences that someone may have had in their lives impact their experience of accessing care. And that's, from the person that greets them when they first, drive into the parking garage to, the provider that's actually, seeing you and maybe providing your exam, understanding the ways in which, sometimes knowingly or unknowingly we interact with people in a way that re-traumatizes them or that triggers, a trauma response, and working to minimize that harm that's being done. So, for instance, in our clinic, we have some providers who really specialize in trauma-informed gynecological care, which is so important for people who may have, sexual trauma history, but also really important for trans and non-binary people who may be very traumatized by having to have exams related to those parts of their body. Mm-hmm. Thinking about the ways in which we interact. Another thing that we talk about a lot at Radian with our gender care is narrating care. So if you're someone who's experienced a traumatic situation, oftentimes there's a lot of anxiety about the unexpected or not knowing, what an interaction may be like. And so we really talk with providers about saying out loud everything that you're about to do. So I talk with young people a lot about, your first meeting with the doctor. You're going to sit on the exam table. No one's going to ask you to take your clothes off. You're going to just, wear your own clothes, and you're just going to talk, and they're going to get your medical history. And that really helps reduce anxiety, because I think a lot of young people are worried about how is dysphoria going to pop up for me in this interaction. And if I can just know ahead of time, maybe that something unpleasant is going to happen, but if I know that ahead of time, I can prepare myself for that. And then we can talk about what are the ways in which your provider can help minimize the harm. So are there sensory things that you have needs around? Are there things that are particularly triggering? How do we plan for those so that you can have a really, as positive of an experience as you can have?
I'm just beaming because I'm just so happy to hear that level of intention and care is happening for our youth. I have a personal connection to Rady's. My brother was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 5. And so we spent, I'm from the El Centro, the Imperial Valley originally, and we spent so much time at Rady's Children's Hospital. And so even back then, this is like 34 years ago, dating myself, but where they would, the physicians and the nurses would bring in stuffed animals, and my brother was given a Snoopy. And so they were like, okay, and this is where we're going to give you a shot, and this is going to feel like, and right here. And they would actually show my little brother on the doll exactly what they were going to do. And then I ended up being a bone marrow transplant donor for my brother. And so they gave me Woodstock. And so they showed me on Woodstock. And so I love that practice is still happening and really helping to minimize the trauma that our youth are going through, because it can be scary going into a hospital.
Absolutely. And the great thing is that this is stuff that providers already know how to do this type of thing when it comes to preparing someone for surgery or preparing someone for, some sort of procedure that might be scary. So it's just redirecting their attention to understand that this also applies to gender dysphoria, and this also applies to the way that, trans and non-binary and queer people experience healthcare settings.
That's amazing. So the next question is, how can healthcare providers practice gender-affirming healthcare more effectively?
Yeah, I think, we talk a lot with primary care doctors and with providers who may have some hesitation because they feel like, I need to be an expert in this care or I can't serve this community. And the reality is, I think it's like being, culturally humble in any other aspect of care. It's listening to patients and understanding that patients are the experts on their lives and patients know who they are. I think oftentimes when we talk about trans and non-binary youth or youth who may be kind of questioning their gender identity, there's this inclination, I think, sometimes to question whether young people can know who they are. And I think that's the quickest way to signal to that young person that you're not a safe person for them to be open with. And I think one of the most important things in a healthcare dynamic is to have trust with your provider. So really listening, really understanding that person as an individual, not making assumptions about other trans people you may know. Not all trans and non-binary people experience their bodies in the same way. Not all people need the same things. And so really taking that time to listen.
Yeah. What a concept. It really gets down to it. I mean, it's so simple sometimes. Like, I've heard horror stories of LGBTQ folks who are, come in with pink eye and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, but you're a gay. So like, I can't help your pink eye, like, or whatever it is, it's like, no, I'm still actually a human being, and regular old medical science will help us get through this moment. Thank you.
It's true. And I think the other piece is name and pronouns and just understanding how important they are. So we talk a lot about pronouns and correct names for trans and non-binary people are like medicine. And we know that using the wrong name and pronouns can cause an immense amount of harm, and using the right name and pronouns can cause a lot of healing. And so, if you were about to watch your colleague give a patient the wrong medication, you would probably step in and say something. And so we want to frame the name and pronoun conversation in the same way. We need to help each other do the best work we can do. And that means that we have to be willing to be active allies and to step up and intervene if someone is being harmed.
And looking at the whole person. Yeah. Well, that brings us to our next question, which is how has your journey as a queer, non-binary, trans person influenced your work and your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been helpful in that I'm one queer, trans, non-binary perspective, so I certainly don't represent everyone's experience, but I do know what it's like to sit in a doctor's office and to wonder if I'm going to be heard, to wonder if my provider really understands, or if I can be open. I've certainly had those experiences where I had to, kind of tailor my story so that it, would be an easier conversation with a healthcare provider. And so I think that's been really helpful. I think also working with families, I've experienced my own family going through a journey of kind of coming to understand myself. And I think that has helped me to really not be judgmental when I have families come in who really are at the beginning of this journey and who love their kids, but they don't know what they don't know. And they desperately want to help their kids, but they just need somebody to walk them through that. And so I think, that's helped me have a lot of patience with families and to really not judge them, because I don't think I've met a single parent yet who didn't come from a place of love, even if what they were doing was causing harm.
I think that's a really hard concept for a lot of folks to understand. And I'm really glad you brought that up, is, we're helping our own families understand, right? And, we talk about the concepts of coming out, and that's great. We also sometimes don't talk about the mourning process or the loss of expectation that our family members go through to learn relearn who the person is in front of them, even though to us, like, we may be the same, like they're learning something new. And so it is a journey and a process for our own families, or the people that we work with. And so again, it goes back to just really great that you are there and that Radies is taking the lead on this to really make sure that they're helping the families and the physicians through understanding that process.
And I think, I'm lucky to work with a really great team of physicians who, really take a collaborative approach. And there are some times where there are conversations that, I, as a trans person, just am not going to be effective in having a certain conversation with a family. And that's when, the physician will step in and have a conversation that they may be better positioned to have. And then there are times when I can have a conversation with a family that the provider could never have. So, we all bring parts of ourselves to this work, and figuring out how to kind of lean on one another and really kind of create a scenario that's going to help the family most.
That's incredible. I'm really glad to hear that it is that collaborative. So how about, would you say that parts of your identity have led to challenges in your career, or can you speak to any of that?
I think there were certainly jobs that I've had in the past where there was no queer visibility, no trans visibility. And so it felt daunting to be able to bring all parts of yourself. I think starting my work at the center certainly created a space where, I think for the first time I could integrate all parts of myself. I know that there are some families that I meet with who, and I rarely share, details about my own identity, but families make assumptions based on, who they see. And so there are some families who are just not going to hear anything that I have to say because they think that as a trans person, I can't, adequately assess their child. But I think that those situations are few and far between. And again, that's why we have a team approach, so that I'm not the only person that people have to meet with.
Well, it's so impressive to think, like, to even hear that and how far it's come, because it wasn't always, not that it's easy now, right? I mean, obviously we all have jobs doing this work for a reason, that the work still needs to be done. But to even know that here we are sitting in a moment where people, young people are watching this right now, and they are seeing a trans non-binary person who is a director of gender affirming care at Radies Children's Hospital. Like, that is a new thing that exists, and you get to be that person. And that is inspiring to folks. And it goes to why you're receiving the award this year. And I just think, like, all of the work that happened before this for you to have this position. And then I hope that that you having this position is also changing perceptions for folks and building a better, safer, and inspiring path for the next generation of folks. And quite literally. So
I think none of this, the creation of my position, this kind of work towards expanding the gender clinic would have happened without years of kind of community advocacy, young people, being vocal about what they need from a healthcare system, parents really collaborating with one another and pushing these systems forward. These things take time, and they don't happen without that advocacy and that, people being vocal.
Absolutely. And I mean, the center, so many community advocates and just those supportive parents, and that's how things really get done. You want to get something done, piss off a parent. So
that's true.
Yes. Oh, let me see. The next question is, COVID-19 pandemic has revealed dire shortfalls and disparities in our healthcare system, especially for POC, queer and trans folks. Can you speak to how any of that has impacted your work, any of the challenges that have brought that COVID has brought to you?
Yeah, so we, pretty quickly in our clinic transitioned to a complete telehealth model. We felt like most of the care that we're providing involves talking and was something that could easily be done remotely. And I think we quickly found that families, for the most part, really, and young people really preferred that model of care. I think for a lot of young people, that distance from that healthcare setting that can be so sometimes felt really safe. I know that if I'm sitting in my bedroom talking to my doctor, there's no way I'm going to have a physical exam today because I'm sitting here in my bedroom. And I think that's reassuring for some young people. I think many of the young people that we've been working with have really appreciated having a break from school and being able to kind of be at home, especially for some folks that are in, an early kind of transition process and really want that space to kind of not have to go to school every day, especially if they're in a school setting that's not the most supportive. And then there's been this other kind of cohort of young people. It's the young people who have just gone off to their first year of college and have kind of for the first time found their people and been able to kind of really go on this journey, and then unexpectedly had to return home with COVID. Some of those young people are struggling because they didn't expect to have to leave that cozy cocoon, and they're back in the fishbowl of their families sometimes. And I think that's felt really disheartening for some young people. But I think in general, COVID has meant that we're reimagining what healthcare provision can look like. So we serve a pretty large geographic area. We have families that come from Imperial Valley. We have families that come down from Riverside, families coming from northern Mexico, and to think about ways that we can provide care without them having to drive hours and hours to see us, I think will really just ultimately improve access for some of our families that live in more rural areas.
That's incredible.
So we're, we have started doing top surgery assessments over telehealth, and that has also really kind of increased that access. We're doing a study right now to look at, if we were to kind of move forward with expanding our telehealth services, what are the best practices? What are our trans patients saying they want out of a telehealth service? What works for them? What doesn't work? What are the barriers? So that we can really, this is kind of an opportunity to get it right.
How many gender affirming care centers like Rady's are there in the country?
So there are over 50 clinics around the country, many at large hospitals, some not. But yeah, it's rapidly expanding.
And what would be the closest to you? What's the most nearby outside of Rady's?
Well, so within San Diego, there's been actually kind of an explosion of care. And so Planned Parenthood, for instance, has started providing gender affirming care. Folks at San Ysidro Health are expanding their care, providing some pediatric services. Borrego Health has for a long time been providing a lot of care kind of all over both, Southern California. And then, Children's Hospital in LA has been a long time leader in this care, and our, colleagues that we work closely with. The nice thing about this type of care is that the clinics are very well networked, and it's a pretty small community of providers. And so we all kind of lean on one another to make sure that we're all kind of providing the most up-to-date and best care.
I love that. And I ask because, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, maybe it was that long ago. It feels like yesterday, but 2009 and 2010, one of the big calls to action, and even up into 2013, I remember, was that we had this dearth of gender affirming care, in particular for youth. And so to know that in what is a relatively short period of time, that there has been this explosion in competent services that really less than a generation ago just didn't exist.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of really the goal of our clinic at Rady. Is we know that kind of as the largest children's hospital in San Diego, that when families encounter something that they're not sure about, they may look to a place like Rady, and we want to be prepared to answer that call. And it may mean that ultimately we help connect them to a provider that's closer to them geographically, or that's maybe a better fit for them for whatever reason. But we want people to know that when they call Rady, they can have answers and they can be connected to whatever it is that they need.
That's amazing. Let's see. How can the community help marginalized voices find confidence and power? This is more of a generic question, I think. But I think, how can the community help marginalized voices find confidence and power?
I think passing the mic to marginalized people, so giving people space to speak on their own experiences, not speaking for people. I think young people have a lot to say, and I think this next generation of young people give me a lot of hope, definitely. I can't wait until I'm kind of like the conservative voice in the room, and these young people are pushing us forward in a more progressive way. So I think it's listening. They have things to say, and they're knowledgeable, and they have ideas. I think looking at who has access to positions of power and making sure that the right voices are at the table making decisions.
Mm-hmm. The kids are going to be all right. As long as we keep it up, the kids are going to be all right. I swear our youth programs, some of our kids are just incredible, and like they're just ready to take on the world and way smarter than I was when I was their age. And I'm just, you know, every generation's doing their part, and it's just great to see this progress.
Yeah.
What are you? Let's see. What was the next question? We are so proud of our LGBTQ youth, and we know that many are feeling isolated at home right now. And during this difficult time, what words of encouragement would you give them?
I think, to know that they're not alone. I think often when I meet with young people, they feel like they're the only one experiencing what they're experiencing, and knowing that there are lots of other people kind of experiencing the same thing. I think also it's really important for young people to connect to history and to have connection with trans elders. And there's such a rich history of resilience in this community. And, I think we talk about health disparities, and those things are so important. And I have a lot of parents come in and they have a lot of fear about things that their children may face in the world. But I think equally important is helping them connect to the parts of the history that really demonstrate so much resilience, and to understand the kind of legacy of building families of choice and the ways in which people have connected out of survival. And I think if young people can kind of connect with elders I think there's a strength that people take in knowing that you have a history, that you're not alone in this moment, but there's a whole, there are generations of people behind you, kind of upon whose shoulders you're standing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important. And I love that you talked about resilience. So we have Pride Live coming up here in just a little over a week. And right now it's looking like it's going to be about 8 hours of pre-recorded and live content. And throughout that, we've included these stories that we're calling stories of resilience. And it is a very focused lens on San Diego LGBT history specifically, and a lot of the challenges that the LGBT community has faced here over the last 50 years, and how we've been resilient as a community, and really honoring our elders, honoring the pioneers, but really specifically talking about some of the big challenges through Briggs Initiative and HIV and some of the terror attacks that we've been through, and how our community has found resilience. And times have been tough. We didn't always have a Pride organization that was the size that we are, or the LGBT Center that has as many programs and supportive services that they do, which you're on the board of the LGBT Center. And for folks watching who didn't know that, and now Rady's Children, there's so much that has happened that we have all fought for, and that helping our youth get connected to those stories and that history. I think that is so true, that it helps them know that they're a part of something much bigger, though they might feel isolated from that at home.
Absolutely.
And just another plug that we collected all the regional LGBTQ youth serving organizations. So if you actually go to sdpride.org/youth, so many of them are now doing this sort of online virtual meetups. And so whether it's North County LGBT Center or the LGBTQ Center or Our Safe Space, and I think Gender Fluid Collective, there's a few others, PFLAG, well, they're doing the adults. But they're all meeting online, and they are finding spaces for youth to connect and support each other. So it's really great to see how they're adapting with the technology and really taking hold of that.
And I think that's been so great for some of our young people who maybe aren't so comfortable going physically to a location the first time. But I think it feels like a less daunting way to connect with other people. So that's another place where I'm hopeful that we'll kind of continue some element of this virtual connection.
Yeah, I think so, because it feels safe in some of the same ways you're talking about the telehealth, that, it can be so scary to go to an LGBTQ center, right? You're like, oh God, because that means something, and there's a connotation to that. And what if I'm caught, and what are other people going to think? And especially when you're young and you're figuring that out, that can be terrifying. But maybe clicking on a link and going to a Zoom room from your cell phone is, easier and safer, and you can clock out real quick and no one's going to know. And that's a little easier.
Yeah. And that being said, there are people who absolutely need that in-person connection, and, it's so important too. So I know that the folks at the center are really working hard to try to kind of meet all of those needs right now, and doing kind of phone check-ins with people and hopeful that they'll get back in person shortly. But it's tough to meet all the needs during this time.
Oh yeah, I'm an introvert and I can't wait to be around people again.
That says something.
Yeah. Even with all these things going online, it's been, I think, one of the most, I don't know, one of the things that warms my heart is I'm seeing, like, was it LA and San Francisco and New York, and then of course Global Pride, all those just happened in virtual spaces, and seeing the comments of young people saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. This was my first Pride. I finally got to go to a Pride. I've never been able to go to a Pride, and this is the first way I was actually able to feel like I went to a Pride and connected with people." That's just been really, wasn't expecting to have all the feels seeing that.
Yeah, I think it's been huge for people to be able to dip their toe into something that doesn't always feel comfortable.
Yeah. So speaking of which, actually, this wasn't in the questions that we sent over, but I wanted to talk briefly about what I mentioned in the intro. 7 years ago, I was drugged and raped, and quickly found that there were not services for me. That the educational materials, that even these advocacy groups that were supposed to be there for survivors, the materials, the resources that were there were so directed towards cisgender women, and that was really hard to go in and experience that. And a lot of the LGBT content that was provided still talked about the shame of being LGBT, and I was just like, what am I receiving right now? And Dolores, Dr. Jacobs was the CEO at the center at the time, and we connected with the center and the Center for Community Solutions and San Diego Pride, and we worked together to try to formulate what it was that LGBTQ survivors needed. And we met for about a year amongst ourselves, sort of like talking about the different things that we needed. And I really felt like when you stepped into that coalition in your role as the Director of Behavioral Health, or I think you got the promotion like in the middle of that, it was night and day, and I can never thank you enough for really pushing that work forward. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about your role in the LGBTQ Survivors Task Force and what the role of that group did, because I don't know that a lot of folks really know that it exists still, or what it really does.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a mental health provider, I definitely heard, from the members of that coalition that there was this really lack of accessible, trauma-informed and kind of LGBT affirming providers, and kind of the available services were not adequate to meet people's needs. And so I think we spent a lot of time brainstorming and trying to get the right people to the table, kind of combination of people with clinical backgrounds, lived experience, both combinations of all of those things, to figure out what was going to be the best kind of plan of action for our region to make sure that people had the education and the knowledge that they needed to provide care. And I think trans care is similar in that we can't, our small clinic can't be everything that all trans and non-binary people need, in the same way that the center can never be everything that the LGBT community needs. And so we needed to look at ways to increase the competency of all of the different service providers within San Diego. And so I think the big action for the first year was putting on a conference and looking at how could we kind of make more accessible that education that people would need, so that they could provide care within whatever context it was that they were working. And then, I know we did a lot of talking about bystander intervention and kind of engaging some industry folks to make sure that that was also a component of the intervention. And then also making sure that there were spaces for survivors to talk and connect and heal and feel seen and heard. And I think now I sadly had to kind of leave that project because of starting at Rady, but I think we're in like the third year, maybe.
It continues on.
Yeah. And I'm just like blown away by how much things have expanded. It's amazing.
It has continued on, and it's just been really incredible to see, because you're so right. It was about bringing in together the community organizers, the advocates, the people with lived experiences, the nonprofits that had resources or minimal resources, but like pulled together, we were able to actually accomplish something greater. And like North County Lifeline with Kathleen Thompson, and CAMF came on board, and really like it was all these people sort of brought a different lens, a different skill, a different perspective, and we made it free. I mean, there was like a $40 charge if you wanted educational units, but really it was free because you're right, we wanted to build the capacity outside of just the LGBT Center or the Center for Community Solutions. And part of what happened early on was the LGBTQ Center or LGBT Center helped to train CCS on LGBTQ cultural competency. Mm-hmm. And then CCS was like, okay, and we're going to train LGBT Center folks on trauma-informed care and survivor care. And then it was like, okay, now by our powers combined, we're going to train. And it was like 114 people that first year who were then able to like come and learn in this deeper way. And that was just, it went on to its second year, and this is its third year. And I don't know if you're aware yet or not, but the conference is still happening, but it's going to be like this. It's going to be virtual with like breakout workshops. So we're still doing it. It's going to be sometime this fall, and we'll be announcing the date soon.
Awesome. So exciting. And I'm hopeful that that platform will also kind of allow you to reach some people that, geographically can't come to Hillcrest, or, who for whatever reason can't be there in person.
Yeah, and I think to our understanding from the committee that is still meeting virtually, their understanding is that we are still the only conference of this type in the country, and that started between the center and Pride and CCS. So, and it's still going, and folks have actually started to fly. Like last year, folks were flying in from around the country to come to the conference, and so I think you're right that the reach this year will be that much further.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So, what's been your biggest personal frustration during COVID? This is just a fun question. Like, what's the thing that you're like, man, this sucks?
Well, I'm an introvert, in case you didn't know that. So I'm living my best life. COVID is, I'm happy to be at home with family. I think the challenging thing is I have a 5-year-old, and so figuring out how to make sure that he gets all of his needs met while being stuck at home with us. And, I definitely miss, traveling and seeing people, and I'm an introvert, but I also like to connect with people. So I'll be happy when I can kind of more freely connect with people.
Agreed. Introvert over here too, but I think my introvert meter is about to run out, and I just I need to actually be around folks for a little bit, but who knows how long that'll be.
Yeah, totally.
What's the thing that's been bringing you joy in all of this? Maybe it's also your 5-year-old.
I think it's, hands down just the young people and the families that I get to see every day, and just seeing these amazing kids be so authentic with their lives, and to be able to be on that journey with them feels like just the biggest privilege. I get to see this kind of intimate part of their journeys that not everyone gets to see, and I feel really lucky to be able to be a part of that. Thank you.
So that was the end of our pre-written questions, but it's Pride season, so and we've still got some time. What's your favorite Pride memory? It could be your first Pride memory or most impactful. It doesn't have to be San Diego Pride. Not that I'm biased. It could be any Pride.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Pride memory?
Well, my first Pride ever was actually in Virginia. I went to college in Virginia. And so I think I went to Pride in Richmond, maybe much smaller than Pride in San Diego. But there's something about a small community, especially in the South, where just LGBT organizing has almost like a different meaning, more of a survival need, I think, around it. And then I lived in Boston for a while, so I really enjoyed going to, Boston has a great Dyke March that's really important. And I think that seeing that kind of empowerment of all different types of gender expression was really something powerful for me. And then I think, I'm trying to think when my first Pride in San Diego was, but probably that first year that I moved back here to San Diego, where I was able to be there kind of with my spouse, and then being able to take my kid, I think it's just been amazing.
And that was 2011.
Yes, yeah.
That was my first Pride on staff. Was 2011.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And then I think we had a newborn during the year that it rained, so we got to skip that year.
That was 5 years ago. So yes, that was.
That was perfect timing.
I think that was I thought that was the most traumatizing Pride, but who knows?
Who knows?
We all got wet and had fun and danced in the rain, and it was great.
Yeah.
So what would be your Pride message? I know we already talked about what would you say to youth right now, but what's your Pride message to folks who are watching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my Pride message would be that our work is not done. I think that there are a lot of ways that things have gotten a lot better for some people, and there are people being left behind. And I think it's important for us to kind of remember the origins of Pride and to understand that that there are still a lot of people who don't have access to the things that they need, and there's still a lot of voices that are not being heard. And while it's a celebration, and that's really important, it's also important to know that Pride is about action, and it's about community organizing, and it's about pushing things forward. And we haven't arrived yet. Yeah,
that's very real, and it's great to be in a city where our Pride organization itself isn't just the organization that puts on a parade and a festival, that the Pride organization here is a year-round education and advocacy organization with 37 different programs doing that work. So if folks want to get involved in that work, they can do it through the Pride organization or through the center or North County Center or PFLAG, or there's I think we have 81 LGBT serving community nonprofit partners at this point, because our needs continue to grow and more nonprofits continue to sprout up to serve different niches in the community. So there's so many ways that folks can really get involved, because you're so right, that work is not yet done. And we had a major Supreme Court victory with Title VII, but that's still just part of it. And whether it's getting counted with the census or showing up to vote, registering to vote, showing up to vote, organizing people to get out the vote, those are just some accessible things that folks can do in the next few months. And there's so much more work to do beyond that. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bix. I love you so much. I appreciate you so much. It's just been an incredible honor to know you and to work with you all these years. And I look forward to seeing all the incredible things you're going to continue to do for our community. And if any of us here watching, or me personally or Pride, can do to support the incredible work that you're doing or that Radies is doing, I'm sure we're all here to help. Yes, definitely appreciate that. We are always, I think, in our clinic looking for more support. Without kind of financial support, we can't continue to expand the program. So yeah, and it's such an honor. I really appreciate this award. Somebody who's not always comfortable with the spotlight. I appreciate caring about the work that's being done with youth. Well, we're excited that it got to be you this year. I was so thrilled, and it's so deserving. And I know that you are an introvert, and I know that you shy away from public speaking. And so I feel like we got tricked you into no, we're just it's you and me. We're just talking, and it's super fine. Don't worry about the thousands of people. It's a big scenario for me. So yeah, I will take a virtual event any day. Perfect. Bix, thank you so much for joining. Happy Pride. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Thanks. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's just been a joy to be able to bring all of this new educational content into your living rooms. And it's been wonderful to see where normally when we would do an educational event or a speaker series, we maybe get 40 to 100 people in a room. But these virtual events, we're actually getting somewhere between 6, 10, or 50,000 people who are watching over this series of either it being live or as it remains on our page and folks are tuning in and sharing it. So I just really appreciate all of you for tuning in, for sharing the content. And thank you to everyone who's contributed. Obviously, Pride, the parade and the festival are our single biggest fundraisers that we have every single year. And with COVID-19, that's canceled all of our in-person events and a big chunk of our income. And so for the folks who have really stepped up and supported by giving monthly or donating in the last few weeks, thank you so much. We've actually had a record number of donors, and we raised just over $35,000 in just the last couple of weeks. And so we're still raising funds. If you enjoy what San Diego Pride does as a year-round education and advocacy organization, if you appreciate the content that we're able to deliver to you now, please consider becoming a monthly supporter of San Diego Pride, and you can do that at sdpride.org/donate. We've got a lot more educational content coming your way. I'm really excited that SheFest is happening this Saturday, and it's not just one streaming event, it's several streaming events happening all at the same time, so you can pick and choose which piece of the program that you want to partake in. So all of that information is at our website, of course, sdpride.org. Our interfaith event, Light Up the Cathedral, is happening next Wednesday. Looking forward to that. Of course, the Spirit of Stonewall rally will be happening next Friday at 6 o'clock, the 17th. And we actually will be raising the Pride flag. Please do not go to the Pride flag. We're still socially distancing, no in-person events. We're just streaming things live. We're going to raise the flag just like we normally do. And then Pride Live will start Saturday, July 18th. At 10 a.m. and will run for about 7.5 to 8 hours. So we're looking forward to all of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Fernando Lopez, they, them, theirs pronouns. It's been an exciting year, to say the least. And together we rise. Happy Pride season.